Don't skip. Your soulmate secretly tested your honesty and broke down in tears when they found out. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because long before your soulmate reached the emotional moment that changed everything, there was a period of quiet observation that you never knew existed. While life continued moving forward as usual, while you focused on your daily responsibilities, your goals, your routines, and your personal journey, someone was paying closer attention than you realized. And listen to this, they weren't watching because they wanted to judge you. They weren't watching because they wanted to criticize you. They were watching because their heart had become interested, but their past experiences had taught them to be cautious. Your soulmate had trusted people before. They had believed promises before. They had given chances before. And unfortunately, not every experience ended the way they hoped. Because your heart needs this right now, every disappointment leaves behind a lesson. Every broken promise leaves behind a scar. Every betrayal creates another reason for someone to become more careful the next time they open their heart. Over time, they developed a habit of observing before trusting. Not because they wanted to be distant, but because they wanted to protect themselves from repeating old mistakes. And listen to this, when they first started noticing you, they felt something they couldn't easily explain. It wasn't just attraction. It wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't just admiration. There was something deeper. Something that made them pause. Something that made them wonder whether you were different from the people they had encountered before. At first, they ignored the feeling. Then they questioned the feeling. Then they tried explaining the feeling away. But the feeling remained. And your heart needs this right now because some connections create questions before they create answers. Some people enter our awareness and quietly challenge the assumptions we've carried for years. That is exactly what happened. The more they noticed you, the more they found themselves wanting to understand who you really were beneath the surface. So they started paying attention. Not in obvious ways. Not in dramatic ways. Not in ways you would notice. But quietly. Carefully. Patiently. And listen to this, the test they created wasn't a game. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't designed to make you fail. It was simply their way of searching for truth. They wanted to know whether your actions would match your words. They wanted to know whether your character remained the same when nobody was watching. They wanted to know whether the kindness they noticed was genuine or temporary. Because your heart needs this right now, words are easy. Promises are easy. Appearances are easy. Consistency is difficult. Character is difficult. Authenticity is difficult. And that was exactly what they were looking for. The test happened in everyday moments. Ordinary moments. Moments most people would never think twice about. They watched how you treated strangers. They watched how you handled disappointment. They watched how you responded when life became stressful. They watched how you reacted when honesty was inconvenient. And listen to this, every observation carried weight. Every small interaction became another piece of information. Every choice you made revealed another detail about your character. At first, they expected to find contradictions. They expected to discover inconsistencies. They expected to find evidence that would justify staying emotionally guarded. But that evidence never appeared. Instead, something unexpected happened. The more they observed, the more impressed they became. The more impressed they became, the more confused they felt. The more confused they felt, the more closely they paid attention. And your heart needs this right now because confusion wasn't coming from anything negative. The confusion came from the fact that you weren't fitting into the patterns they expected. Their experiences had taught them that people eventually reveal hidden motives. Their experiences had taught them that appearances eventually crack. Their experiences had taught them that everyone becomes inconsistent sooner or later. But every time they looked closer, they found something different. They found honesty. They found integrity. They found consistency. They found sincerity. And listen to this, at first they convinced themselves they simply hadn't looked long enough. They believed more time would reveal a different picture. So they continued observing. They continued watching. They continued testing the assumptions they had formed. Days passed. Then weeks passed. And still the same pattern remained. Your actions matched your words. Your values remained steady. Your character remained consistent. And your heart needs this right now because consistency is powerful. Anyone can be impressive once. Anyone can say the right thing once. Anyone can create a good impression temporarily. But authenticity survives repetition. Authenticity survives time. Authenticity survives observation. That realization started affecting them emotionally. More than they expected. Because every time they found another reason to trust what they were seeing, one of their old fears lost a little more power. Every honest action weakened a doubt. Every sincere choice weakened a fear. Every genuine moment weakened a wall they had built around their heart. And listen to this, they may not have admitted it immediately, even to themselves. They may have continued pretending the test was still undecided. They may have continued searching for reasons to stay skeptical. But deep down, something was changing. The questions were changing. The doubts were changing. The way they saw you was changing. And your heart needs this right now because what started as a test was becoming something much bigger. It was becoming a discovery. A discovery that challenged everything they believed about trust, honesty, and human nature. For the first time in a very long time, they started wondering if maybe their fears had been wrong. Maybe not everyone hides their true self. Maybe not everyone disappoints. Maybe not everyone breaks trust. Maybe genuine people still exist. And listen to this. That possibility felt both exciting and terrifying. Exciting because it gave them hope. Terrifying because hope requires vulnerability. Hope requires belief. Hope requires someone to lower the defenses they've spent years building. Yet despite their fears, they couldn't ignore what they were learning. The truth kept appearing. Again. And again. And again. Until eventually, they reached a point where denying it became harder than accepting it. Because the more they searched for proof that you weren't genuine, the more proof they found that you were. And that realization was the beginning of a journey that would eventually lead to tears, healing, and a truth powerful enough to change their heart forever. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after the secret test began, your soulmate expected the answers to arrive quickly. They believed they would either find a reason to trust you or a reason to walk away. They thought the situation would be simple, clear, easy to understand. But listen to this, what actually happened was something they never expected. The more they observed you, the more confused they became. Not because they found something suspicious. Because they couldn't find anything suspicious. And your heart needs this right now because every time they looked closer, they discovered another reason to believe in you. Another reason to trust what they were seeing. Another reason to question the fears they had carried for years. At first, they convinced themselves it was temporary. They told themselves people can only hide their true nature for so long. They told themselves everyone eventually reveals a different side. They told themselves patience would expose the truth. But the truth they expected never appeared. Instead, a different truth kept revealing itself. Again. And again. And again. And listen to this, every conversation seemed to confirm the same thing. Every interaction seemed to point in the same direction. Every observation seemed to support the same conclusion. Your words matched your actions. Your promises matched your behavior. Your character remained consistent. And your heart needs this right now because consistency is difficult to fake. Anyone can create a good first impression. Anyone can say the right thing when circumstances are easy. Anyone can appear kind when they are receiving something in return. But genuine character reveals itself when nobody is paying attention. Genuine character reveals itself when there is nothing to gain. Genuine character reveals itself through repetition. And that was exactly what your soulmate kept seeing. The same honesty. The same integrity. The same authenticity. Day after day. Moment after moment. And listen to this. They started replaying old memories in their mind. Small moments they once overlooked suddenly seemed important. Little details they barely noticed before suddenly carried emotional weight. They remembered situations where you chose honesty even when it would have been easier not to. They remembered moments where you remained true to your values despite pressure from others. The more they remembered, the more the puzzle came together. The more the puzzle came together, the harder it became to deny. And your heart needs this right now because what they were discovering wasn't just information. It was evidence. Evidence that challenged everything they thought they knew about trust. For years, they had believed trust should always come with caution. For years, they had believed everyone eventually disappoints. For years, they had believed vulnerability was dangerous. But the truth they discovered about you refused to fit those beliefs. And listen to this, that realization was emotional. Much more emotional than they expected. Because every time they found another reason to trust you, one of their old fears lost a little more power. Every honest action weakened a doubt. Every sincere choice weakened a fear. Every genuine moment weakened a wall they had spent years building. And your heart needs this right now because walls are difficult to maintain when reality keeps proving them unnecessary. They started questioning themselves. Not questioning you. Questioning themselves. Why had they become so afraid of trusting people? Why had they expected dishonesty before honesty? Why had they convinced themselves that disappointment was inevitable? And listen to this, those questions led them somewhere unexpected. They began realizing how many decisions in their life had been influenced by fear. How many opportunities they had avoided because of past experiences. How many times they had protected themselves from pain before pain even had a chance to exist. That realization was powerful. Not dramatic. Not overwhelming. But powerful. And your heart needs this right now because awareness changes people. Once someone becomes aware of their fears, those fears lose some of their control. Once someone understands why they think the way they do, they gain the ability to choose differently. Your soulmate was beginning to understand. Beginning to heal. Beginning to believe. And listen to this, they may have found themselves lying awake at night thinking about everything they had learned. Replaying conversations. Remembering moments. Connecting pieces that once seemed unrelated. The more they reflected, the clearer everything became. The clearer everything became. The more emotional they felt. Because deep down, they knew what was happening. The test was ending. The answers were arriving. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. And your heart needs this right now because the biggest surprise wasn't discovering who you were. The biggest surprise was discovering that their heart had been right all along. They wanted to doubt. But the evidence wouldn't let them. They wanted to stay guarded. But the truth wouldn't let them. They wanted to remain skeptical. But reality wouldn't let them. And listen to this, eventually they reached a point where denying what they felt required more energy than accepting it. Fighting the truth became harder than embracing it. Questioning every detail became harder than simply acknowledging what was right in front of them. You were genuine. You were honest. You were authentic. And the more they accepted that reality, the more emotional the entire journey became. Because your heart needs this right now, for someone who has spent years expecting disappointment, discovering something real can feel overwhelming. It can feel healing. It can feel unbelievable. It can feel life-changing. And that is exactly how your soulmate felt. The secret test had given them answers. The answers had created understanding. The understanding had created emotion. And very soon, those emotions would become so powerful that they would no longer be able to hold them back. Because the truth they discovered wasn't just changing the way they saw you. It was changing the way they saw the entire world. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after all the questions, all the observations, and all the quiet moments of reflection, your soulmate finally reached a point where they could no longer deny the truth. The secret test had been going on for longer than you realized. They had watched. They had listened. They had paid attention to the little details. And listen to this, Every answer they found kept leading them to the same conclusion. You were exactly who you appeared to be. Not perfect. Not flawless. Not someone who never made mistakes. But genuine. Honest. Real. And your heart needs this right now, because for someone who has spent years expecting disappointment, discovering something genuine can feel overwhelming. At first, they didn't know how to process it. Part of them wanted to celebrate. Part of them wanted to cry. Part of them wanted to question everything all over again. Because what they discovered challenged years of beliefs they had built around themselves. And listen to this, those beliefs did not appear overnight. They were built through experience. Through heartbreak. Through broken promises. Through moments that taught them to stay cautious. Every disappointment became another brick in the wall around their heart. Every betrayal became another reason to trust less and protect more. Over time, they convinced themselves that expecting the worst was safer. Safer than hoping. Safer than believing. Safer than trusting. And your heart needs this right now, because when someone lives that way for a long time, they begin seeing the world through fear without even realizing it. Fear becomes normal. Doubt becomes normal. Suspicion becomes normal. And that is exactly why what they discovered about you affected them so deeply. Because the truth did not fit the story they had been telling themselves. The truth challenged it. The truth dismantled it. The truth exposed it. And listen to this. As they reflected on everything they had learned, memory after memory started flooding back. Moments they once dismissed suddenly carried meaning. Conversations they barely thought about suddenly felt important. Small acts of honesty that once seemed ordinary suddenly appeared extraordinary. The more they remembered, the more emotional they became. The more emotional they became, the harder it became to stay composed. Because your heart needs this right now, they realized something that shook them to their core. You had never given them a reason to doubt you. The doubts had never come from you. The doubts came from their past. The fears came from their past. The walls came from their past. And for the first time, they saw that clearly. And listen to this, that realization hurt. Not because it was bad. Because it was honest. Because it forced them to admit how much fear had influenced their decisions. How much fear had influenced their expectations. How much fear had influenced the way they viewed people. And your heart needs this right now, because honesty can be emotional when it reveals something we weren't prepared to see. They started wondering how many opportunities they missed because they expected disappointment. How many connections they held at a distance because they expected betrayal. How many times they ignored their own heart because they were afraid of being hurt. Those questions weighed heavily on them. Very heavily. And listen to this, eventually the emotions became too strong to ignore. The walls they spent years building started cracking. The defenses they relied on started weakening. The fears they carried started losing their power. And then it happened. The tears came. Not dramatic tears. Not uncontrollable sobbing. Just honest tears. Real tears. Healing tears. And your heart needs this right now because those tears were carrying years of emotional weight. Years of disappointment. Years of caution. Years of loneliness. Years of pretending everything was fine. The tears were not about sadness. They were about release. The release of fear. The release of doubt. The release of emotional burdens that had been carried for far too long. And listen to this, as those emotions surfaced, something unexpected happened. Relief appeared. A deep relief. A peaceful relief. A healing relief. Because for the first time in a very long time, they felt safe enough to believe again. Safe enough to trust again. Safe enough to hope again. And your heart needs this right now because hope is powerful. Especially for someone who almost stopped believing in it. Hope reminded them that not everyone is the same. Hope reminded them that honesty still exists. Hope reminded them that authenticity is real. And slowly, through those tears, something inside them began healing. The old wounds did not disappear instantly. The old fears did not vanish completely. But they became smaller. Weaker. Less powerful than before. And listen to this, they started realizing that genuine people have a unique effect on others. They don't just create trust. They inspire healing. They don't just create admiration. They inspire growth. They don't just change perceptions. They change hearts. And that is exactly what happened. Your honesty became a mirror. A mirror that showed them how much fear they had been carrying. A mirror that showed them how much healing they still needed. A mirror that showed them a future that looked different from the past. And your heart needs this right now because by the time the tears stopped, they were no longer the same person who started the test. Something had changed. Something important. Something permanent. The answers they found had become part of them. The truth they discovered had become part of them. The lesson they learned had become part of them. And deep down, they knew one thing with absolute certainty. The test was over. The truth had won. The walls were falling. And for the first time in a very long time, they allowed themselves to believe that something real had entered their life. Something worth trusting. Something worth valuing. Something worth remembering. And that realization changed their heart forever. Don't skip. Listen to this carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because the tears were never the end of the story. In many ways, they were only the beginning. After all the observations, after all the doubts, after all the hidden tests and quiet moments of reflection, your soulmate found themselves standing in a place they never expected to reach. A place called clarity. A place called understanding. A place called truth. And listen to this, what shocked them the most was not what they discovered about you. What shocked them the most was what they discovered about themselves. Because your heart needs this right now, sometimes we spend so much time examining other people that we forget to examine our own fears. We become experts at spotting potential problems. We become experts at protecting ourselves. We become experts at expecting disappointment before it arrives. Your soulmate had been doing exactly that. For years. without even realizing it. They had convinced themselves that caution was wisdom. They had convinced themselves that distance was protection. They had convinced themselves that expecting less would prevent pain. And listen to this, the truth they discovered about you challenged every one of those beliefs. Not through words. Not through promises. Not through grand gestures. Through consistency. Through honesty. Through authenticity. The kind that remains unchanged no matter who is watching. And your heart needs this right now because consistency is powerful. It does not demand attention. It does not ask to be noticed. It simply exists. Day after day. Choice after choice. Moment after moment. That is what your soulmate kept seeing. The same character. The same integrity. The same sincerity. Again and again. And eventually, something incredible happened. Their focus shifted. Instead of asking, "Can I trust this person?" they started asking, "Why am I so afraid to trust?" And listen to this, that question changed everything. Because once someone starts asking honest questions, honest answers begin appearing. They realized their fears were not coming from the present. They were coming from the past. Their doubts were not coming from you. They were coming from old wounds. Their hesitation was not being created by reality. It was being created by memories. And your heart needs this right now because that realization was both painful and freeing. Painful because it forced them to confront things they had avoided. Freeing because it showed them those fears no longer needed to control their future. The walls started falling. Slowly. Quietly. Naturally. And listen to this, as those walls fell, they began seeing life differently. People looked different. Relationships looked different. Possibilities looked different. The future looked different. Everything seemed clearer than before. Because your heart needs this right now, clarity changes perspective. And perspective changes everything. The things they once tolerated no longer felt acceptable. The excuses they once accepted no longer felt convincing. The relationships they once defended no longer felt aligned. Not because the world changed. Because they changed. And listen to this, growth often feels exactly like that. At first, nothing appears different. Then suddenly, everything appears different. The standards become higher. The awareness becomes stronger. The understanding becomes deeper. And your heart needs this right now because your soulmate was no longer the person who started the test. That version of them was gone. The fearful version. The overly guarded version. The version that expected disappointment before happiness. The version that trusted doubt more than intuition. That version was fading. And something stronger was emerging. Something healthier. Something wiser. Something more open. And listen to this, for the first time in a very long time, they started believing in possibilities again. Possibilities they had stopped allowing themselves to imagine. Possibilities they thought belonged to other people. Possibilities they quietly convinced themselves would never happen for them. But now those possibilities felt real. Because your heart needs this right now, authenticity inspires hope. Not fantasy. Not illusion. Hope. Real hope. The kind that grows from evidence. The kind that grows from truth. The kind that grows when someone repeatedly shows you who they are. And that is exactly what happened. The more they reflected on everything they discovered about you, the more hopeful they became. The more hopeful they became, the more healed they felt. The more healed they felt, the more their future began changing. And listen to this, they started realizing that trust is not built through perfection. It is built through consistency. They realize that meaningful connections are not built through appearances. They are built through authenticity. They realize that the strongest people are not the ones who never get hurt. They are the ones who continue believing despite past disappointments. And your heart needs this right now because those lessons became part of them. Permanent lessons. Life-changing lessons. Lessons they will carry for years. The hidden test ended. But the impact remained. The tears dried. But the healing remained. The questions disappeared. But the answers remained. And listen to this, perhaps the most important realization of all was understanding that genuine people still exist. Not perfect people. Not flawless people. Genuine people. People who mean what they say. People who remain true to their values. People who choose honesty even when it is difficult. People who stay authentic regardless of who is watching. And your heart needs this right now because discovering that truth restored something inside them. Something they thought they lost. Something they thought disappointment had taken away. Something called belief. Belief in people. Belief in connection. Belief in sincerity. Belief in the possibility that not every story ends in heartbreak. And that belief changed everything. Because sometimes the greatest gift someone can give another person isn't advice. It isn't reassurance. It isn't even love. Sometimes the greatest gift is simply being genuine. Simply being real. Simply being themselves. And listen to this, whether you realize it or not, that is exactly what happened here. Your soulmate started the journey searching for flaws. They ended the journey finding truth. They started the journey expecting disappointment. They ended the journey discovering hope. They started the journey testing your honesty. They ended the journey healing their own heart. And that is why this story was never really about the test. It was about transformation. It was about growth. It was about trust. It was about the moment someone realized that authenticity still exists in this world. Because once a person discovers something real after years of doubt, they can never see life the same way again. And that realization will stay with them long after the test itself has been forgotten. Sparkles, the test ended. The truth remained. And their heart was changed forever.